fallout, smoke, women crying for their sons because their sons are not, Romans killing riotous groups that are rising up. Free Judea, free our people, autonomy for Israel. You had Herod, an Edomite, and his dynasty. Herod's ruling, killing any potential threat, any potential Messiah. Then you had the Pharisees and the Sadducees that we learn from Josephus are not Jews by birth. No.
Brothers and sisters, they are there. We are not lost. We are scattered. We are original Hebrew.
Let's go! All praises be to the Most High God. Yeah, I say it.
I was opportune to meet my grandparents, whom from childhood had always made us to understand that we are one of the lost tribes of Israel. Okay. So from my grandmother.
And ethnicity is a cult. What's up, Zion Dynasty? This is your favorite dreaded Israelite, the man, the myth, and the legend, Mr. JB Zion. So y'all, I just gotta jump into this thing. First, I say peace, love, blessings to all my Israelite family, all the sojourners of Zion, all those Cleveland Gentiles. And y'all, we gonna jump right into this thing. Like it up, comment, share, subscribe, share this video with as many people as you know, and we just gonna have a conversation. In this video, we're gonna do a lesson on the Gentiles. We're gonna talk a little bit, and a lot of this is spur of the moment. I got another lesson that's gonna be dropping, y'all. That's gonna make that for tomorrow. But I wanna have a preaching segment a little bit about our people coming together, and I'm gonna use the historical context of the Gentiles, explaining the Gentiles from a salvific point of view, right? The Gentiles as they pertain to salvation. Talk a little bit about the grafting in, cleaving Gentiles, but just go ahead and kind of go into that whole Gentile salvation thing to kind of explain to you all, and a lot of you all that have been following the teachings know that our firm stance is that Bible, the Holy Judeo Scriptures, is the cultural heirloom, it is the heritage, the history book, and the prophetic utterance for a nation, a people. That Bible is a family book, family. It's all about our people, the children of Israel, from glory to captivity and the resurrection of the beloved family of the Creator. Why is this important? Now, I'm gonna start making this thing practical for y'all. It is important to understand the Bible from the cultural nuances, the point of view from the Israelites, so that you can be ahead of Satan. I gotta tell y'all, because if you don't know that Bible is only for a family, you can deal with the Bible after a colonist mindset, all right? So first, I'm gonna open up with some precepts, show you all the mission of Yeshua, and show you that the Gentiles and salvation for Gentiles has to do with the same family that had been separated, disjointed, a lot of dysfunction within the home. You had Israelites that knew their culture, knew their heritage, and those that were practicing Torah. And then you had Israelites that had been Hellenized and chose to fight for the nations, chose to fight for white supremacy. We gonna deal with it, because this spirit is running rampant right now, where you have Israelites that are trying to sabotage, and they'll come against this movement, come against the awakening, and they think they're doing God's will based on the Eurocentric viewpoint of the Bible versus the family viewpoint of the Scriptures. Understand what I'm saying?
Dr. Barashingo, we're trying to look at the political, economic, and cultural conditions of the Hebrew Israelites during the time that Jesus would have been on the scene in Palestine in the Roman occupation. What would it be like? Kind of give us an overview of why Rome, number one, occupied that area. What did they gain from that occupation in terms of its wealth, perhaps its food products and so forth? And what was the socio-political climate like? Why did the people rebel? So what were they treatment? Give us an overview.
Well, the Romans were there because they needed to be able to feed their armies. And at that time, the yield in Palestine was very great in terms of grain and food crops. it was a part of the Fertile Crescent. Of course, we know the most abundant ark in the Fertile Crescent was the one in the Nile Valley in Africa. And they had also conquered Egypt, as they called it, or Khemit as well. They even went to try to go further south to conquer the Cushites, or whom they call the Ethiopians, but the battle was so great that was put up against them, as it was led by the Queen Mother. In fact, they said this particular Kandake, this Queen Mother, in 27 BCE was the date. In fighting the Romans, she was struck in the eye by an arrow, and her eye was hanging out the side of her head, and she still fought the Romans for the rest of the day. They say the Romans won that battle, but they were anxious to sue for peace, and they granted the Cushites anything that they asked for because they wanted to get out of that land. They really didn't want to have to fight these people anymore because they doubted that they could win a battle against them if they fought them again. So now their efforts were stepped up in Palestine because they needed the food there. So they crushed the Israelites in Palestine. They became the overlords there. In fact, they came in actually as partners to help one group in a dynasty fight the other group in this Hasmonean dynasty. There were two separate families fighting for who would rule the throne. And I think it was Aristobulus who called them in to help him against the other faction of his family, and the Romans in turn ended up taking over the whole thing and appointing their own king, who was Herod, who was not even related to the Hebrews. So that was their primary reason for being there. Now, the Romans were not really known for anything in the ancient world except their strict laws, which were enforced by their military power. They had a very complex and efficient military machine. That's what they had going for them in their favor. In terms of intellect, they had never been known for that. They had to get their intellect from the Greeks, who themselves admitted that they got it from the Africans. But the Romans had that organizing skill. It's something like the Germans of today. They had that organizing skill. So they now come into Palestine. They're overlords in Palestine, and they're ruling over a people who are very difficult to rule over, because if you're a foreign ruler, if you're a foreign potentate, because they believed, according to their laws, the laws of Moses, the Torah, that no one was to rule them but Almighty God. And that Almighty God would rule them either through their king or their judges or their prophets or their priests. But whoever the ruler was in the land, they had to be connected with them as a people, born out and bred by them as a people, and practice, at least claim to practice, their religion and their culture. And they said as long as they were not ruled by someone like that of their own, then they were in disfavor with God. And therefore, to get back in favor with God, they had to have sovereign independence. Those two things were one and the same in their thinking. So they kept a holy war going on consistently, a stubborn holy war against the Romans. Now, they did not have the arms and the might and the organizational structure that the Roman military complex had. But they did have the tenacity. And they fought what we know as guerrilla warfare, which is very effective when you have a smaller force or ill-equipped force fighting against a more advanced or sophisticated force. You use guerrilla warfare. And they... What was the Roman army like? Chariots and so forth? Can you kind of explain it? They had something called a pillar, I think, or whatever. The flanks. The flanks, the Roman flanks was very difficult to break. It was, they would send out, I forget, I believe it was a cohort. It may have been a cohort of soldiers. And they would come in this flanks, and they would march with these shields, these rectangular shields with like a spear point on them. They would march with these shields. When they got in place, when you would shoot arrows at them or throw spears at them, they would turn those things in precision and form a flanks around them. They would form a protective coat around them, from the sides, from the front, from the back, and the top. The ones in the middle put theirs on the top, and the ones on the side turn theirs to the side, to their flanks, and the ones in the front turn them out front. And that was very difficult to break. them that way. Their cavalry was very good. They had expert cavalry. And of course their charioteers were outstanding. Most of their charioteers were from Persia or from out of Africa or some land where black people lived. That's where many of their charioteers came from. And their most outstanding legion, the greatest of all the legions they possessed in their army, was the 10th Legion. And that was the African Legion, the leopard men.
So Rome had a multicultural army.
Well, yeah, like most governments will get anybody to fight for them. They had Germans, they had a German contingency fighting for them, they had a Gaul contingency fighting for them. Any place where they had gone and had taken conquest of the people, they conscripted those people to go to war for them. Just like any imperial state does, just like America does. That all imperial countries do that. And Rome definitely was an imperial country. So they ruled stringently. Very stringently. And when they came into Palestine, which is actually a part of Africa, they didn't come with any women. Very few of them had women. A few of the officers or the governor may have brought his wife with him, but they didn't have any women. So they took the women by force who were there. So there was a struggle over that, because the men didn't want them coming and taking their women. You had a group that went to the mountains and fought from the mountains. This group was known as the Zealots. They were the freedom fighters of that nation. They were beloved of that subjugated nation, and they were supported by the people of that subjugated nation. Their headquarters and their hotbed was in the hills of countries of Galilee. And Nazareth was one of their main places where they came to get their supplies, where Jesus was raised up. That's where they came to get their supplies. So they constantly waged war against the Romans. Now, at times it was more intense than others, because when Tiberius Caesar, who was the Caesar or the president of Pax Romana, as you would call it, of the Roman Empire at that time, sent Governor Pontius Pilate to be governor over that region, which incorporated Judea, Syria, and I think a couple of other places and provinces. Judea was a small nation within it, but Judea thought of itself as separate and apart from all the rest of it. When he was sent there, one of the first things he did was take money from the temple treasury, which was forbidden. And even the Uncle Tom preachers, who were these Pharisees that you heard Jesus riling against so much, these scribes and Pharisees, because of their betrayal of the people. They were the Negro preachers of that day. And when they took the money from the temple, even the Pharisees now, who generally kept the people in check, kept it from being an overall outright people's revolution and uprising, they now even began to join the Zealot movement and to fight against the Romans. And the thing which was the camel, the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, was when Pilate came in and had an eagle, a Roman eagle, placed over the temple, which was the center of worship for the Israelites in Jerusalem. And that's when everybody became involved in rebellion against them, because that was a desecration, a sacrilege, that was idolatrous as far as they were concerned. And they would die rather than offend their God. So everybody went to war. And that rebellion was led by one Judas of Galilee. YESHUA ben Judas of Galilee was his name. And he led thousands upon thousands against them. He was taken, it was in the year 6 CE. The one whom you call Jesus may have been about 12 years old then. And he had to, on a particular day, a very sad day in the nation of Judea, he had to walk home through a row of crosses that these black men were hung on, because as we have talked about before in previous sessions, the Israelites were black people before and they were black people then. You had some admixture there, but not to the degree that it later became. So on those crosses hung approximately 2,000 men who had been in rebellion against Rome. That's how they punished those who rebelled against them. And at the head of that was YESHUA ben Judas of Galilee. And this obviously made quite an impression on the young mind of the Yeshua ben Joseph, or Jesus as you call him, the Christ as you call him, that we know of in the New Testament. So what the Romans said was this. Tiberius said, look, Pilate, we can't afford this, because these people are hard to rule in the first place. And it's taking a lot of expense to rule them, and it's actually not cost efficient if we have to keep fighting them on this level. And we can't keep fighting them and fighting all over the empire to maintain the empire. You cannot go in there and do anything that is opposed to their religious sensibilities. Leave them and their religion alone.
So how did they have the people, what did the Romans make the people do? What was life like under Roman domination?
Under Roman, let me just finish this point here. Where Tiberius says to Pilate, don't you ever do that again, because if you do that again, I'm going to recall you from this post. And I may even send you into banishment, because you're costing the Roman government money. So there was agreement made with the preachers, the priests, the Pharisees, that we won't do this desecration anymore if you keep these people in check and quiet them down from carrying this rebellion out any further. So that again was a source of a problem when Jesus and John the Baptist rose up. This was a thorn in the side of the Negro preachers who wanted to keep everything cooled out, wanted to keep the people from going to war. As a matter of fact, you remember when they took Jesus to the Romans, and when they had him on trial, before they took him to the Romans, they said it's better that this one man should die than the whole nation.
Yes.
They were afraid of those Romans. They didn't have a case against him, but they said, look, we can't have him run out here stirring these people up like this. We made a deal with these Romans. We have filed through on this deal. That was the political situation. Now, the Romans could conscript your house. They could grab you and make you carry their burdens for a mile. And later in the book of Mark, he comes up with this lie that Jesus said, if they tell you to carry the burden a mile, offer to carry another mile. If Jesus had told those people something like that, they would have left him. Nobody would have come out to listen to him at all, because he would have gone completely against the sentiment of the people. And there was no way that he could be popular among the people and not speak to their desire for freedom and liberation from those Romans. They could come and take anything virtually from these people they wanted to. They could go in these people's houses and get their wives or daughters or anything. A lot of that went on. And many Hebrew Israelites died trying to defend the honor of his woman or his daughter or his home before these Romans.
So they made the people work and they took the crops. Explain that.
It was a form of enslavement. It was a form of bondage. They subjugated the people. And when a person comes in as a captor and puts you in captivity and subjugates you, then they treat you all kinds of ways. They don't treat you as a human being. And they were not treated as human beings. And they were very unhappy people. And that's why every child, that male child that came first in the family, most of them was named Yeshua, which in English is Jesus. And in Matthew it says, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. Now people think you're talking about fornication or smoking or drinking or adultery or stealing or something. It wasn't referring to that. Sin to them was an imbalance. The word meant imbalance. And as long as the Romans were ruling over them, and not a king who was there to stand in the place of their God ruling over them, to rule as a representative of their God, as a son of God. That's what they called their kings. So it wasn't unusual for Jesus to be called that, and it wasn't the first time. As long as that wasn't happening, they were living in sin. Because they said we have to be living in sin because we're in God's disfavor, and if we're in God's disfavor, that means we're doing something wrong. And the thing that proves that we're in God's disfavor is that a foreigner is ruling over us and making us do all sorts of things that we would not be doing, things that are contrary to the laws of Moses and according to our culture and to our morals. So that's the kind of situation you had there with those Romans and the Hebrews. And it was a very unhappy situation. It was not a friendly situation, except in those few cases where I said you had the Pharisees and maybe some other people who would collaborate with the Romans. And when that was found out, the people stoned them and did all kinds of things to them. Or they would send the Sicarii, The Sicarii were the dagger men. They were the elite forces among the Zealots who moved at night, and they would assassinate those who had betrayed the people. You would hear a dude walking down the street, a priest, a Pharisee, and you'd hear a scream in the night. And you'd see him laying there with a dagger in the center of his chest, but you wouldn't see anybody. Because they could come in and they could leave. They could fade into the night, into the domain.
So Jesus now is born, and let's talk about Jesus. Let's talk a little bit about Jesus' background. You know, he went into Egypt and he was went to school at the age of 12. Well, where did he go to school and what did their scenes? Let's talk about them. Then he comes on the scene, and what is he trying to do? What is he about?
Well, we know that he spent at least several years in Africa, on Khemit, in the Nile Valley, which is called Egypt. Just exactly what period of his life this was done is debated much among scholars. We know that in his infancy he was there, because that's where his parents went. Whether he was taken back at another time or not, we do not know. But we do, I know that Dr. George G.M. James says in the book Stone and Legacy that Jesus had achieved the level of the Hierogrammat in the mystery system of the Nile, the high cultural mystery educational system, which was that he had studied the 8 books of Tahuti. Now, I have never seen any documentation to corroborate that, but from the things that he taught and the things that he did, he obviously possessed a knowledge that was not common in Israel at the time, that no rabbi could have taught him in Israel because they did not have that advanced a culture, as you would find in the Nile Valley or in India or in Persia or even in Babylon. They had not advanced to that level. So to be able to do the things he said, he did, and many of the things he said which were not original. These things were said by Buddha, these things were said by Akhenaten, these things were said by Hotep, Kijimnai, Ptahhotep. I mean, these things have been spoken many, many thousands of years ago. And you have to therefore have been taught in their institutions or by someone who had been trained in their institutions. What more than likely happened was that Jesus was taught by the Essenes, who were like the Buddhists, were like Buddhist monks there. They lived a very, they lived a life off away from everything else. They lived, what type of life? A kind of monastic life they lived. And they didn't get caught up in many worldly things. And the knowledge which they possessed, and which you find in their writings in the Qumran rediscovery they found in the Qumran Valley, they are of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Their writings and their commentaries on those scrolls, on the book of Isaiah and the book of other prophets, show that they had a knowledge which was far greater than that possessed by the normal Hebrew Israelite at that time, and that knowledge was somehow linked with the knowledge that came out of the Nile Valley, which in all probability their order was established by priests from the Nile Valley because they had established and given the authorization to Solomon to institute many of these teachings in Solomon's temple in the day that that was built. So it was a very common thing for this close-knit relationship between the Nile Valley high culture scientist priest, the Israelite priest, and priests of many other nations. Because the Nile Valley was the source of all knowledge at that time, and the University of Waret, which the Greeks call not Luxa, the Greeks called Luxa, was the center, the hub of all knowledge and learning at that time. And most everyone had to refer back to it or get their credentials from there, or get their accreditation from someone who had gotten their credentials from that institution.
Now, I've heard that Jesus was bringing about a revolutionary movement, a socialist or African-based way of living. What was his teaching? What was he trying to do? How did he go about it?
His teachings was a cacophony of Buddhism, Judaism, the old Nile Valley teachings. So much of what he said was said by Asar, as you'd find in the book of the Coming Forth by Day and by Night, Mr. Ahmed, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or by Heru. So much was said by Buddha. I mean, definitely. You can see the teachings of Buddha and what Jesus had to say. You look at the movement he structured. You look at the 12 basic people he had there. The 12 basic lieutenants he had with him, because he had 127 actually, who were the people who were the ministers of that movement. But there was a basic 12, and within them was another core group of 3. And among them was Simon the Zealot, Zealots were known for their militancy against the Romans. And when you look in that group, you will see a motley of people from different kinds of institutional bases or philosophies of life within the Hebrew Israelite or Judaic structure. So it seems as though he was trying to pull together a black united front, because he was supported by all these groups. Even some of the Pharisees who couldn't stand the fact that the other Pharisees were collaborating with the enemy joined unto him. In fact, he had to be buried in a Pharisee's tomb. Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea were great followers of Jesus, and I probably supported him economically. Many of the women in his movement were married to men who worked in the governmental structure. And they would be what we would consider today to be GS-10s, GS-15, GS-17, as high as that. Some of them, one worked as high up in the cabinet of Herod. So they were well-to-do. They were middle-class people. So these women were able to follow Jesus around. And the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, tells you these women were the ones who put the money in the movement. So they were financed. So he had there's a complex of different people from many walks of life, and that's a movement. And it wasn't called Christianity.
It's called Kingdom of God.
It was called the Kingdom of Heaven, was its purpose. Kingdom meaning government of heaven, not in heaven. Note the word said Kingdom of Heaven is at hand. And it was called the Nazarene Party, because he was called the Nazarene, the Nazarene, from the word nostrim, the Hebrew meaning keepers of the nation, guardians of the nation. And that's what he had. There was no Christian church or anything at that time. And that Nazarene party had incorporated in it people from the Pharisaic party, people from the Zealot party, people from the Essene party, from different parties. So it was like an umbrella for all of those parties to come up under this movement.
What do you mean party? I mean, they didn't elect presidents and things like that. How do you mean party?
It was a political party because the aims of the Hebrews were political as well as spiritual, because they did not separate the two. The political aim was also a spiritual aim, because they had to fulfill the will of God for them. And in their minds, the will of God for them was to live as a sovereign, independent people, following the laws of God as they were revealed to them through the laws of Moses. But that was their understanding at the time. Anything else being said to them would have made no sense whatsoever and would not have been entertained, not even for a moment. Jesus would have been laughed at as a clown. He certainly wouldn't have had these crowds of people around him like he had. And the reason why these people came out to hear him is because there was a great expectancy. They were looking for a deliverer to come. Had he not extended to them some hope of that, if he had said to them at any point that, look, I'm not interested in your desire to be free of these Romans. I'm not interested in your political goals and aspiration. I'm only interested in making everybody love each other and we get ready to die and go to heaven. Those people would have left him out there by himself, because they were not interested in anything like that. They just were not. So this was incorporated later into the New Testament. Some 300-400 years later, people made Jesus say this, because they needed to use these documents now to placate and to keep under control the masses of the people once the Roman Empire adopted Christianity as an official religion. It was therefore used to keep the people tranquilized.
Now, we want to get to that, but didn't his party was the Black Panther Party?
No, what it was is the symbol of the dynasty that he was born to. He came out of, if you look at his genetic tree, his genealogy, you will find that all of those people in there had been of the family of Hasmonean, of the recent, I'd say about the last 10 or 12 of them, of his predecessors, of those he descended from, his ancestors. They were of the family of Hasmonean. Hasmonean was the great father out of which came the Maccabean family, which made a strike for freedom and got it from the Syrians, who were subjugating them at the time in the year 167 BCE under Judas Maccabeus and his brother John and several others. Judas Maccabeus meaning Judas the Hammer. Yeah, and they struck for freedom and established them as an independent nation until the Romans came later and subjugated them there. When there was a fight between one member of the Hasmonean party and the other for power, then they called the Romans in to help, I think it was John Hyrcanus, come into power. It was either John Hyrcanus or Aristobulus. I forget which one it is. But anyway, one was called against the other. And when the Romans did come in and take control, then they took the power from him as well and gave it to a foreigner, an Idumean named Herod. Yeah. So now, Jesus' family line in terms of as a dynasty was the Hasmonean dynasty at the time. And their symbol of their household was a panther, a black panther. Now I got that from the writings of Sir Godfrey Higgins in the book Anacalypsis. And he seems to substantiate it very well, because this panther, black panther symbol went all the way back to ancient Greece. Bacchus, their god of wine and dance and singing, also had a black panther as his symbol. So it was a very popular symbol in the ancient world. So you might say there was a Black Panther party even at that time and in that place. Would you go by that symbology?
Okay, now let's move on to Jesus and his movement, and as it began to, it was only 3 years old. So what are some of the things that happened during this time?
Several things. One of the things too that must be kept in mind is that even though the Gospel of Mark does everything it possibly can to apologize for the militancy of the Nazarene party and to separate the Roman Christians and these other people who are coming into Christianity now from the Nazarene party, because they're scared to death at this time, because this book is written after the Romans came in and tore up Jerusalem and burned it to the ground, not leaving one stone upon another. They're so afraid now that this Gospel of Mark comes out and says, no, we don't have anything to do with those fighting people over there. We are turn the other cheek kind of people. We are nonviolent, pacifistic people. We don't have anything to do with that. So they now put words into Jesus' mouth that he probably didn't speak, but when they put it into their mouth, it becomes contradictory to what other words they say he spoke, such as, I'm sent only unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which says he was a separatist. A woman came to him for healing, who was a Syrophoenician woman. She came to him for to heal his daughter, and he told her through this whole long thing about, you don't give the crumbs of the children to the dogs. I'm sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And it's only after she persists that he says, all right, I'll do it. And after his disciples said, you better get her away from you because she's calling the attention of the Roman soldiers around here, that he does it. He goes on to say to them, go only unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Cover all of the land of Israel and carry the gospel, and then shall the end come. He doesn't tell them to go to the Greeks or the Romans or anything. He also says to them, the kingdom of heaven is taken by violence, and the violence presses it by force. That's a very violent statement there. I've heard preachers try to do all kind of exegesis on it, and they still can't get away from the fact that he says the kingdom of heaven is taken by violence, and the violence presses it by force. There's another occasion upon which he says, now is the time to sell your clothes and buy a sword. What would be the reason for that? If you're not going to use that sword. you have a contradiction there. They said, well, when Peter cut the man's ear off and Jesus put it back, this was a part of the thing of trying to separate Eurocentric Christianity from the Nazarene party. The question has to be asked, what was Peter doing with a sword in the Garden of Gethsemane if Jesus was non-violent? He wouldn't have let him carry a sword in there. And why did Jesus say just before going into the Garden of Gethsemane that now was the time to sell your cloak and buy a sword? Why did he go into the temple and commit a violent act of driving the money changers out of the temple? That was not a non-violent act. And there was no way you were going to get them out of that temple unless they were afraid of you, unless you had some show of force, which obviously he had some contingent with him that had some military thrust to it. So these are some of the things you have to keep in mind. You're showing a schizophrenic personality here. He's violent on one end. He's telling you that in order to get what you're after, the kingdom of heaven, you have to have violence. But on the other hand, you're telling me that he's non-violent, and that he's opposed to violence, and that he's a pacifist. So you have a contradiction right there.
So he builds a movement. Let's take it from there.
He builds a movement.
Highlights in his life.
And the movement becomes very, very strong. It becomes a popular movement among the people. And this is why the Negro preachers are concerned. Now, they may not have been able to take Jesus because they had attempted to take him before. They sent soldiers to arrest him, but the people were so strong and pressed around him that they came back and they said, well, what happened? They said, never a man spoke like this before. But they couldn't take him. They were afraid to take him. The reason why they were able to get him this time, it appears, is that when Jesus did go into that temple, which was obviously a move to take the temple, which would therefore take the control of the economics that those Negro preachers had at that time, because it was at festival time. They was coming up on the festival of the Passover, so a lot of money was changing hands in Jerusalem. People from all around different parts of the nation were coming to Jerusalem. Is that his forces got bottlenecked there and he lost out. Because they had attached to that temple, they had a Roman, not a cohort, but they had, and not a legion, but it was a company of Romans who were assigned to protect it, to protect these Negro preachers. And they came down, and what probably happened is there was a swelling of his forces, the Zealots and so forth, and they got bottlenecked in those narrow passages leading into the temple precinct. And they were cut off from the main body of their forces.
So first, family, we're going to do some precepts. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 21, it says, this is the angel speaking to Mary, telling Mary that you shall name his name Yahusha. Now, this is the prophecy that the angel Gabriel is giving to Miriam, or Mary, as we will call her, but Miriam in the Hebrew, telling her that she's going to give birth to this child. He's going to be the Savior, and you shall name his name Yahusha, for he shall save his people from their sins. Now, y'all, I got to tell y'all, if you don't have Dr. Windsor's Golden Series, if y'all don't have Dr. Windsor's books, you have to have From Babylon to Timbuktu. It's just a must. Most Hebrew Israelites, nearly every camp, every person that ascribes to us being the people of the book, have read this book, From Babylon to Timbuktu. The honorable historian, Dr. Rudolph R. Windsor, goes into the history of the West African Jewry, the North African Jewry, the Yoruba B'nai Ephraim. So when I say Yoruba B'nai Ephraim, there's so much scholarship, y'all, but I ain't gonna go off into a rant. Y'all check out that Yoruba Jews video that just dropped. But he goes into a lot of history about the different African populations of Jewish people, the different migrations of the Israelites throughout the continent. But there is another book that is least known that I haven't seen too many Israelites talking about, which is Judea Trembles Under Rome. Now, in Judea Trembles Under Rome, now I paid like $200 because Amazon was price gouging. Y'all, these books, they're doing they're trying to stop the awakening, but they can't stop this work. I'm trying to tell you, ain't no power on earth can stop the resurrection of the dry bones from the grave. This is the spirit of the Most High Yah, and can't nobody stop it. We can't stop it. The Gentile, y'all don't get me started. So they're trying to raise these prices, make these books impossible to get. But before I preach, Judea trembles under Rome goes into the historical context of the scriptures. It deals with the Essenes, the Nazarenes, the different Sicarii, the militant Israelite groups during the occupation of Rome. Now, y'all got to study the Apocrypha to get some of this history, because it really started in Maccabees. But in Maccabees, you had Alexander the Greek, Alexander the Macedonian of Chittim, of the ancient Edomite Zepho people. He came to power, Hellenized the whole earth. Long story short, he made a process of dominating every region and making them have to worship the Greek gods. Some wicked Israelites went along with that. That sets the stage for the Hellenized Israelites. Now, I'm just throwing this out there to show you something. Christ during his time was a blood-born Israelite. Now, we went to Josephus, where I showed you guys that there were a lot of prominent Israelite positions in Judea during the time of Rome that Israelites didn't hold these positions. Y'all hear what I'm saying? You had Romans in key positions of authority. Understand? So when you had Romans that were the Pharisees, the Sadducees, Josephus shows us that. Even some of Christ, the disciples that followed Christ, some of them were Edomites. You had Edomite centurion, Roman soldiers watching the Sicarii, watching all these zealots, watching these Israelite Essenes and Nazarenes to make sure that no military leader rose up. Now keep in mind, COINTELPRO. So you had all of this going on during the time of Christ. And Christ in Matthew 1:21, the angel is saying that YESHUA, Yahusha, will save his people, free the Israelite people from their sin. Our people saw sin as being Deuteronomy 28. That when we broke our culture, when we broke the law, statutes, and commandments, we will be under all nations. So us being under the Romans was sin. So we were longing for the Mashiach, to come and free us from white supremacy, the Roman rulership, the Roman government, and restore autonomy to the children of Israel. That was the gospel, right? Y'all got to catch that. The same spirit of you have a Fred Hampton trying with the Black Panther Party to unite our people, to unite all the black power groups, to be able to change the government in favor of our people. This is what the historical Yeshua was sent to do. He was coming to galvanize all of Israel, unite not just the practices of Torah, but our Hellenized brothers and sisters, and create a black army, a black revolution to be able to unify God's people and to be able to establish the kingdom where our people were in control. You have to know this history when you're looking at the scriptures, because you got a lot of black people that hear what I'm saying and they will side with Europeans. I work with them every day and try to sabotage this movement because they don't know history and how history always repeats itself. This stuff is dangerous because you'll have a person like that brother that sabotaged Fred Hampton and allowed the FBI to go in and spray the entire apartment where Fred Hampton, his pregnant wife were at. And now so many of our people, that whole generation of activists, have been doomed because of Negroes working with the Europeans, thinking that that's God's will for us to be joined hand in hand. That was never the gospel. But before I go off into that, let's go into some more precepts. So we see, family, in Matthew chapter 4, verse 5, it says, Galilee of the Gentiles. Now pause. So during this point when Christ was on the scene, the angel Gabriel says he's going to save his people. He's going to be this savior, this Messiah, to unify God's people. You had Israelites that were called Galileans, right? You had Israelites that were in Galilee that were called Gentiles. This is where Northern Kingdom are scattered Israelites that did not keep Torah per se. They lived within Judea. This is important because it helps you understand the sheep versus the lost sheep, the prodigal son versus the house son. This is one family. Now we see in Luke chapter 1 verses 68 through 72 that the prophet says, "Blessed be the Lord God of Israel for visiting and redeeming his people Israel, that we might be saved from the hand of our enemies, to serve our God, our culture, our customs without fear." So a lot of what our people desired to do during the time of the Romans, we couldn't do. We couldn't rule autonomously. We couldn't rule and self-govern our people just as a nation in our land without European influence. We couldn't do that because we were in captivity. All the prophets, all the priests, they prophesied of the Messiah coming to free them from the hand of all these enemies so that we could worship our God and be free in our own land. This was the gospel, family. I know we haven't learned this in the Christian church, but this is what the historical gospel was. It was black liberation. I say black because we know those Judeans during that time period were Negro in phenotype. And we already know about the Yoruba, the Igbo, all these E1B1A West Africans that we descend from are actually descendants of those Judeans, but y'all already know that story. I say this for people that might not know this history. So, in Matthew chapter 15, verse 24, we see Yeshua say, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So we see that Christ himself is a separatist. He himself, y'all gotta catch this, he himself is a racist, if you want to call it. A racist is just somebody that focuses on the race. The Most High had an exclusive covenant with the children of Israel. We see in the prophet Joel, in Joel chapter 2, verse 27, that it says, I am the Lord your God, O children of Israel, and nobody else. We see in Deuteronomy 7, verse 6, that the Most High said that it is destined for his people Israel to be set above all nations. Y'all, there's so many precepts, and you can look at the entirety of the Old Testament and see that the Israelite people were always meant to be separate and not equal, separate and above all other nations, as long as we clung to our history, our heritage, and the commandments. Why am I harping on this? I know a lot of Christians are,
well, that's the Old Testament. You know, in the Old Testament, you know, God was for Israel, and in the New Testament, he's for everybody else.
It never changed. And now y'all check out these videos, these past lessons. In Jeremiah 31:31, he says, behold, in those days, I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Now, we see this same scripture used in the New Testament in Hebrews 8, verse 8, that says, behold, in those days, I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. The New Testament, nothing changed. The Most High does not change, y'all. Y'all check out that Creflo video, because that's the kind of spirit, that spirit is what is so detrimental to our people being restored, and is fueled by the beast, you know, Esau being the end of the earth, the white European, America-led, Babylonian last kingdom that is to rule is the reason that a lot of these black preachers that don't know history, don't know the cultural nuances of the Bible, they preach this whole, you know, God loves everybody, because they don't know themselves. And they think, okay, we're Gentiles, I just want to be a part of it. They don't know that we're the people of the book. So they want a message that's for everybody because they think their low self-esteem tells them that allow them to be a part. But if I told you that based on the scriptures, that Bible is for one family, it's always been for one family. Any universal system, we see that start based on the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11. In the next chapter, the Most High scatters all people and begins with one family. The Most High has always been a God of family. I say God for y'all to understand. The Creator has always chosen to use one family, and that family be the Amazon warehouse by which he distributes the knowledge of himself. His nature, his character is made known to all other nations, but it's not all people being equal. It's structure, it's government. That's what the kingdom is. The Most High, his people, his family Israel, and all the other nations. This is consistent from Genesis to Revelation. So when you look at the New Testament, the Israelite covenant merely got renewed. The Most High did not do away with Zion. He chastened his people, sent us into captivity, but always prophesied to send the Messiah to regather that family back together and to use us as a nation above all nations, not in wickedness, not to bring oppression, but to show love, show hand in hand by a family exemplifying what that looks like. We were meant to, as a family, love each other after the culture of the Torah, after the law, statutes, and commandments, to be an example to every other people. It's not because Israel, we some great super people. We're the least of people. To this day, we are the most despised of people. That's why the Most High chose us, because he said, with everything that we've gone through as a people, I want y'all to show the earth how to love one another, because all the hell that you've gone through should have put a heart within you of love because of all the hate that you've experienced. Y'all got to hear me. That's why our people are chosen. That's why this history is important. That's why knowing about the Yoruba is important. The Igbo, these Nigerian Israelite tribes that we come from, our family being restored under our history to be an example unto all people. Y'all got to catch this. And Christ's mission was to make that thing happen. Y'all got to hear me. The purpose of Yahushua was not to die for everybody, but to die for the people that he made a covenant with. That's what the purpose of the Messiah was. To be that lamb, that scapegoat, because of the sins and the iniquities of our forefathers, the people with whom the Most High made a covenant with. That's the purpose of Yeshua. He came to clean this family up, to restore us and bring us back together. So we see that, family, in Matthew chapter 15 verse 24, that it says, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Y'all got to catch this in your spirit, right? So now let's go a little bit further. A lot of Christians say, well, what about the Gentiles? What about the Gentiles? We're going to deal with the Gentiles, and I'm going to show you a couple precepts. First of all, we see in John chapter 7 verse 35 that it says, this is the Pharisees talking, where would this Messiah of the Israelite people, where will Christ go that we cannot find him? Shall he go to the dispersed of the Israelites that live among the Gentiles and teach these Gentiles? Y'all gotta slow that thing down. Let's slow it down. Let's slow cook it. It says, where is Christ gonna go? Is he gonna go to the diaspora, the scattered Hellenized Israelites, and teach those heathen? You got to pay attention to the scripture. The scripture is showing you that the purpose of Christ was not just the Judeans that kept the law. This is what Peter had to understand with Paul's mission. Paul was a Roman-born citizen, so he was well accustomed to Hellenized Israelites. That's why he had a heart for those people. Peter, if you weren't circumcised and you ate pork chop, he had something against you, right? Even if you were his fellow people by blood. This is where we see the Samaritan-Jewish conflict. A lot of these Samaritans were actually northern kingdom Ephraimites, but they have been Hellenized dating all the way back during the time of Assyria. So a lot of them trace their lineage to Israel, but they weren't keeping the law, statutes, and commandments, like the woman at the well. She asked Christ in John chapter 4, are you greater than our father Jacob? Wait a second. How is her forefather Jacob, but she's a Samaritan? She's an Israelite. She just didn't do the stuff the Jews did. And the Jews had beef. Now the Jews had a lot of other precepts, a lot of other cultural things they did based on the Talmud, based on the tradition of the rabbis, the tradition of the Pharisees. So if you weren't doing in a little clique all the stuff they were saying along with the commandments, they rejected you. That is a lot to heap upon a people. Now you see the family dysfunction. So Christ coming for the lost sheep, Christ himself coming to restore this family back together, was not just going for the Judeans that kept Torah, but he was going to the diaspora. We see that in John chapter 7 verse 35. Now let's go to another precept. In John chapter 11 verses 49 through 53, the high priest Caiaphas prophesies that Yeshua the Messiah must needs die, not just for those Judeans that were living in Israel, but the scattered children of abroad. We see also in the Apocrypha, in Tobit chapter 13 verse 3, it says, preach Christ among the Gentiles, O children of Israel, for he hath scattered us among them. This was consistent with the gospel. The gospel was for Israel, not just the Judeans, but those scattered. Now family, why did I go through all that? Why did I prove to you that that family is a cultural book? That Bible is the family heritage of one people, and that family putting aside their differences and coming back together. Christianity is the greatest tool of deception. Y'all got to catch that. That was created to sow seeds of discord within our people. Y'all got to catch it. It'll allow a black person to see a young black person like myself. Oh, he talking about some hatred. You know, God, that ain't the God of the scriptures. God don't care about all that stuff. God don't want you coming in here talking about your blackness and all that. Other black people, y'all got to hear me now. They'll see the kufi, they'll see that kind of stuff, and they'll come against it. I'm sent to encourage Zion. I gotta let y'all know where this spirit comes from so that you won't, I know it's gonna still make your heart feel some type of way. You say, man, I just wish my people would just receive this. All of this about us being Israel is just for us to love one another and come together. This is to encourage your heart and let you know the Most High understands. And I'm explaining to you where this spirit, this is a long work of iniquity, y'all. This has been working a long time, thousands of years. When you look at the Council of Nicaea that sought to take the man-child and discard the womb of the woman that gave him life, create a Christianity, whitewash it like white rice, and take the black Yeshua out of history, but use his culture to create a worldwide religion. Y'all got to understand. So in doing that and unifying all people, the Christian church is teaching people black folks don't matter. You know, coming together as a, they ain't gonna say it like that. They're gonna say, well, race doesn't matter. We all need to just love each other and be equal. But if one of our people is at the bottom, you can't treat everybody equally to create equity or equality. Y'all catch that? You have to intentionally target the group that is oppressed to truly balance the scale. This is why when the tiger is endangered, you will see a commercial about help save the tigers, help save the tigers, because the only way to create equality in the animal kingdom is to go and seek after that which was lost. Y'all got to hear me. So when you got white Europeans that hide behind Christianity and say, well, all lives matter, you know, black lives, we're just focusing on one group, they're being deceptive, because they know if we target our people, then privilege is done away with. Nepotism is done away with. Treat everybody right by going after the people at the bottom and giving them an opportunity, giving them that platform equal with yours, looking at their credentials the same as yours. And what you will find is our people have always been qualified. Y'all got to hear me. The amount of wickedness that goes on in America where this person gets a job just based on who they know is white privilege. So equity is not treating everybody the same because you've sabotaged this people. You have to lift them up. And that's what they don't want to happen. Everybody be given a true equal shot. This is why Christ went after the lost sheep, because the wisdom of the Father understands to bring lasting peace is to go after the oppressed, which happen to be his people, and lift them up. That means to set them above. Because on a scale, if you got God's people at the bottom and the nation's way up here, you have to set them above for the scale to finally balance. Y'all got to understand. And the reason I'm breaking this down, y'all, a lot of our people, there's some that watch the channel and they're just trolling, they're just trying to get ammunition because they don't fear God. They don't know the God of the scriptures. When the God that they're talking about is a creation going back to 325, and a lot of Christians say, well, you know, Christianity was older than the Council of Nicaea. Yes, but the Christianity as practiced by the Ebionites, by the Essenes, by the Nazarenes, by those Niger Africans, don't get it misconstrued. What they practiced and believed was totally different than the Roman Catholic Christmas tree, Easter basket, God loves everybody, Israel is done away with, replacement theology, grace is a credit card by which I can swipe to nullify the law. Everything that Christianity is today is not the same that the early first century followers of Yahushua, those Israelites, is not what they practiced. The stuff we're doing today. And a lot of Christians don't know the historical nuance, the cultural difference, to properly place things in their perspective to know the heart of God. Because if I told you the heart of the Father was family the whole time, and for you to love your people, and for our people to come together, that does away with the smoke screen that is white supremacy. And that's what Satan doesn't want. He doesn't want our people to love one another and stop the gang violence. See, a lot of these white folks that hide behind modern Christianity, they really don't want to heal the condition of our people because you have to be intentional. But if you have a gospel that's saying that's done away with, you never give the people a spiritual foundation to use it to have a grounds to substantiate going after one people. Y'all got to catch me. So as long as the church says, well, God doesn't see that, you're brainwashing people subconsciously to never tackle the issue of our people directly because they keep thinking in their minds that God doesn't see that. Well, if the Most High doesn't see that, Satan does, because Satan has targeted the people of God from the foundation. When you look at what our people are going through, Satan must know something. So this is deception. Of course Israel matters. Of course our people matters. And our people, if we don't come together and unite intentionally, the work will never be done. So family, share this with your family. Teach them this history. Go through these precepts because we're in danger as a community, y'all. We got people going into grocery stores, killing our people. They go in there shopping and thinking about plans that they might have had for the weekend. This stuff is getting, and until we're intentional about it, it's not gonna stop, y'all. But there is hope. The Most High said it ain't gonna go like this all the ways. There is a time clock. There is a dispensation that has been given to the world for a set season, and after that, the judgment coming. The Most High gonna regather his people, and he's gonna restore us back to the land that he promised to our forefathers. So y'all take heart, Zion. Be intentional, family. We gotta share this history with our loved ones and let them know that it's the will of the Most High for Israel to come together, for our people to learn this history. That is the gospel. So I love y'all with the love of the Messiah. Peace, love, blessings, and Israelite power to the 12 tribes scattered. I love you all. Be blessed. Shalom. All praises.